the ocean's depths, a realm of breathtaking beauty and terrifying mystery. For centuries, it has spawned legends of colossal beasts and spectral terrors. Welcome to our world, our stories, where today we dive into the chilling tales of monstrous sea creatures, from the crushing Kraken to the haunting sirens. Prepare to uncover the truth behind the myths. Are you ready to explore the abyss? Let's begin. Kraken, monarch of the abyss. Now, let us cast our minds back to an age when the world was wider, the seas largely uncharted, and the line between myth and reality was as thin and shifting as the ocean fog. Picture, if you will, the unforgiving expanse of the North Atlantic, a realm of perpetual twilight in the long winters, where the ice floes grind together with the sound of breaking bones, and the wind howls like a banshee through the rigging of any ship foolish or bold enough to venture there. It is upon such a vessel, let's call her the Northern Star, a sturdy cog built of stout Norwegian pine, that our story finds its footing. Her captain, a man named Eric Redbeard, so called for the fiery hue of his magnificent facial hair, which cascaded down his chest like a frozen waterfall, was a mariner of no small renown. He had faced down storms that would turn lesser men to prayer, navigated by stars that few others could name, and his laughter was as hearty as the ale he so enjoyed. His crew, a motley collection of hardened Norsemen, Swedes, and the occasional adventurous Dane, trusted him implicitly, for he had always brought them home, their holds laden with fish or furs, their pockets jingling with silver. On this particular voyage, they were far from the familiar embrace of the fjords, pushing into waters rarely marked on any map, seeking new fishing grounds, for the old ones had grown thin. Days bled into weeks, the scenery an unchanging panorama of grey waves and an even greyer sky, the sun a pale, indifferent disk when it deigned to appear at all. A certain weariness had begun to settle upon the crew, a quiet yearning for hearth and home. It began subtly, as such things often do, an unnatural stillness. The wind, which had been their constant, boisterous companion, pushing them onward or playfully buffeting their sails, seemed to sigh one last mournful breath and then vanished. The Northern Star wallowed in the sudden, oppressive calm, her sails hanging limp and useless like the wings of a dying bird. The rhythmic creak and groan of her timbers, usually a comforting lullaby to the sailors, now sounded amplified, almost accusatory, in the profound silence. Eric Redbeard stood upon his quarterdeck, his keen blue eyes the color of glacial ice, scanning the horizon. He sniffed the air, a habit ingrained from decades at sea. It was cold, yes, but there was something else. A faint, almost imperceptible odor, like ancient, disturbed earth, and something else, something metallic, like old blood, yet different, more primal. He frowned, his red brows furrowing. "Odd," he muttered to his first mate, a hulking bear of a man named Sven. "The sea holds its breath, Sven. I like it not." Sven, a man of few words but immense strength, merely grunted, his own gaze sweeping the empty ocean. The gulls, those ever-present squawking companions of any seafaring voyage, were nowhere to be seen. It was as if they had been erased from the sky. The men on deck, mending nets or sharpening knives, fell silent too, their banter dying on their lips as the eerie quiet seeped into their bones. Then a new sound, a low, almost sub-audible hum, a vibration that seemed to travel not through the air, but through the very timbers of the ship, up through the soles of their boots and into their chests. The water around the Northern Star began to behave strangely. It wasn't choppy, nor was it swelling in the usual manner of the open ocean. Instead, great oily patches began to appear, as if the sea itself were bruised. The surface would bulge upwards in one area, then subside, only to rise again in another, as if some colossal lung were breathing ponderously beneath them. One young sailor, barely a man, named Finn, pointed a trembling finger towards the port bow. "Captain, look!" All eyes followed his gesture. About half a league distant, the sea was different. It was darker, a patch of inky blackness against the grey, and it seemed to be swirling, slowly, deliberately, like thick porridge being stirred by an unseen hand. As they watched, mesmerized by a dread they could not yet name, the swirling intensified. The water in that area began to rise, not in a wave, but as a cohesive, monstrous mound. "By Odin's missing eye!" Eric breathed, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of the axe that never left his belt. "What manner of devilry is this?" The mound of water grew, higher and higher, until it was a small hill upon the surface of the ocean. And then from its peak, something began to emerge. At first it looked like a series of jagged, dark rocks, glistening wetly in the dim light, perhaps the treacherous tips of a hidden reef. But no reef moved with such purpose, no reef pulsed with such an undeniable, terrifying semblance of life. These were not rocks. Slowly, agonizingly, the truth began to dawn upon the horrified crew of the Northern Star. The rocks were the barnacle-encrusted, seaweed-draped protuberances of a living creature. A creature of such impossible scale that their minds struggled to comprehend it. The sea around this emerging leviathan began to boil and churn, not with heat, but with the sheer displacement of its colossal bulk. And then, the arms. Oh gods, the arms! Like the writhing branches of some nightmare forest, they unfurled from the roiling water. Each one was thicker than the Northern Star's mainmast, a pillar of slick, dark muscle, tapering to a questing, intelligent tip. They rose higher and higher, a dozen or more, reaching towards the sky like supplicants to some dark, forgotten god, before beginning to arch and curve, their undersides revealing rows upon rows of suckers, each the size of a warrior's shield, each capable of gripping with a force that could pulverize stone. The air was now thick with that strange, rank odor, a stench of the deepest, darkest ocean trenches, a smell of ancient decay and raw, primal power. The humming vibration intensified, shaking the very teeth in their heads. The Northern Star, caught in the unnatural currents generated by the rising behemoth, began to drift, slowly but inexorably, towards the epicenter of the horror. Eric Redbeard roared, his voice finally breaking the spell of terrified silence that had gripped his crew. "Oars! Man the oars! Row, you sons of sea dogs! Row for your lives! Steer her away!" But it was like trying to paddle a canoe away from a tidal wave. The creature was still rising, its true form yet to be fully revealed, but already it dwarfed their vessel, casting a shadow that swallowed them whole. One of the colossal tentacles, glistening black and green with ancient slime, swept through the air with deceptive speed. It wasn't aimed at the ship, not yet, but it passed so close that the wind of its passage tore at their clothes and stung their faces with icy spray. It crashed back into the sea with a sound like 1,000 cannons firing at once, sending a wave surging over their decks, nearly washing Finn overboard. The young sailor screamed, a raw, high-pitched sound of pure, unadulterated terror. Another tentacle, then another, began to move with more deliberate intent, their tips seeming to sniff the air, to taste the presence of the fragile wooden vessel and the warm-blooded life it contained. The central mass of the creature, a mountainous dome of flesh that defied any earthly comparison, was now fully visible, a living island of nightmare. And from somewhere within that colossal bulk, though they could not pinpoint its source, they felt more than heard a sound, a deep, resonant groaning, like the shifting of tectonic plates, or the sigh of a god stirring from an aeon-long slumber. One of the questing arms, its tip quivering with anticipation, now hovered directly above the Northern Star's foredeck. It paused there for a heart-stopping moment, a pillar of shadow blotting out the sky. The men below stared upwards, their faces pale, their mouths agape, every hope of escape draining away like sand through their fingers. Eric Redbeard knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the marrow of his bones, that their sagas were about to end, not in a blaze of glorious battle against human foes, but here, in the cold, indifferent embrace of something that should not be, something that had crawled out of the deepest, most terrifying recesses of their ancestors' darkest dreams. The tentacle began its descent, slow at first, then gathering a terrifying, unstoppable momentum aimed directly at the heart of their ship, at the very spot where he and his bravest men stood frozen, watching doom itself uncoil. Scylla and Charybdis, the devil and the deep blue sea, let us set our course for the sun-drenched, wine-dark waters of the ancient Mediterranean, a sea that cradled heroes and gods but also birthed monsters of unimaginable terror. Here, nestled between the rugged coast of what would one day be Italy and the fertile shores of Sicily, lay a narrow, churning passage of water, the Strait of Messina, yet as mortals would come to call it. But to the mariners of old, it was known by the dread it inspired, for this was no mere channel. It was a deadly gauntlet, a watery Scylla trap, from which few returned unscathed, lorded over by two unspeakable abominations. Imagine a ship, perhaps a sleek, black-hulled pentaconter, its 50 oars rising and falling in perfect, desperate rhythm, its bronze-tipped rame cleaving the turquoise waves. The captain, a man named Lycaon, with eyes as grey and stormy as the winter sea, has guided his vessel through tempests and skirmishes, his courage a beacon to his men. They are returning from a long voyage, their hearts filled with the hope of home, their hold perhaps laden with treasures from distant exotic lands. But first, they must brave the passage. As they approach, the very air seems to grow heavy, charged with an unseen menace. The cheerful chatter of the crew dies down, replaced by a tense, watchful silence, broken only by the rhythmic splash of the oars and the strained creak of the oar leathers. The sea itself changes hue from a welcoming blue to a more ominous, bruised purple, and the currents begin to tug at the ship with a malevolent, unseen force. To one side, a towering cliff looms, a sheer wall of dark, forbidding rock that seems to claw at the sky. Its face is pocked with shadowed crevices and echoing caves, and from the highest, most inaccessible of these, a constant chilling mist seems to seep, like the cold breath of something ancient and evil. This is the lair of Scylla. Legend whispers that Scylla was not always thus. Once, in the mists of time, she was a sea nymph of ethereal beauty, her laughter like the chime of distant bells, her form as graceful as the swaying seaweed. But beauty, in the world of gods and monsters, often attracts unwanted attention. Or worse, the bitter jealousy of powerful rivals. Whether it was the wrath of a spurned god, the dark magic of a vengeful sorceress like Circe, or some other forgotten tragedy, the lovely nymph was transformed, twisted into a creature of nightmare. From her waist, where once the gentle curve of her hips had swayed, there now erupted a horrifying cluster of 6 impossibly long and sinuous necks, like monstrous slithering eels. Each neck was topped with a grotesque canine head, its jaws bristling with a triple row of needle-sharp teeth, capable of tearing flesh and crushing bone with sickening ease. These heads, with their wild, bloodshot eyes and slavering muzzles, would dart out from the darkness of her cave with lightning speed. Their barks a cacophony of yelping, baying horror that echoed across the strait, a sound designed to freeze the blood and shatter the courage of any who heard it. Her lower body, it was said, remained fused to the rock, a monstrous barnacle-encrusted anchor, forever binding her to her predatory perch, her hunger insatiable, her malice eternal. She was the swift, unseen death from above, the selective horror that plucked men from their decks like figs from a branch. Lycaon, his knuckles white as he grips the steering oar, knows of Scylla. Every sailor who plied these waters knew. He orders his men to give the cliff a wide berth, to row with all their might towards the opposite side of the strait. But in fleeing one monster, they inevitably draw closer to the other. For on the other side, directly opposite Scylla's cliff, where the water churns in a constant, ominous swirl, lurks Charybdis. She is no creature of defined form like Scylla, no beast of flesh and fang. Charybdis is something more elemental, more primal, a raw, untamed force of the ocean's fury. Imagine a colossal, submerged bladder or the gaping maw of some unseen abyssal entity, a monstrous, living whirlpool. 3 times a day, with a sound like the world itself groaning in agony, Charybdis would begin to suck down the waters of the strait. The sea would begin to spin, faster and faster, forming a vast, inescapable vortex, its sides steep and treacherous, its center a dark, gurgling pit that led to the lightless, crushing depths. Anything caught in this monstrous indraft, ships, men, whales, the very debris of the ocean, would be drawn down into the churning abyss, crushed and consumed. And then, just as terrifyingly, 3 times a day, Charybdis would vomit forth the waters she had swallowed. With a deafening roar, a colossal geyser of boiling, briny water, mixed with the splintered remains of ships, the shattered bones of sailors, and the foul detritus of the deep, would erupt skywards, before crashing back down to roil the strait into a chaotic, seething cauldron. There was no malice in Charybdis, no cunning, only the relentless rhythmic hunger and regurgitation of the deep, an indiscriminate doom that promised utter annihilation. So, Lycaon and his crew find themselves in this sailor's nightmare. To steer too close to Scylla's cliff is to invite those 6 ravenous heads to snatch his men, their screams echoing against the stone as they are dragged, still living, into the monster's fetid lair. Yet to veer too far from that dreadful precipice is to risk being caught in the inexorable pull of Charybdis, to see his beloved Pylos and all her crew swallowed whole by the gaping, swirling maw of the sea. The oarsmen strain, their muscles burning, sweat stinging their eyes, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The air is thick with the chilling mist from Scylla's cave on one side, and the thunderous, gurgling roar of Charybdis growing louder on the other. Lycaon can see the dark, swirling patterns in the water ahead, the telltale signs that Charybdis is beginning her terrible inhalation. He barks orders, trying to steer a desperate middle course, a path so narrow it seems impossible. Suddenly, from the cliff to their starboard, a chorus of horrifying yelps erupts, closer than they had dared to imagine. 6 shadowy, snake-like necks lash out from the gloom of the cave with blinding speed. Lycaon watches, his heart a stone in his chest, as 6 of his best men who had shared his bread and his battles, are plucked from the deck, their cries of terror cut brutally short. He sees the flash of white teeth, the dark spray of blood against the grey rock, before they are dragged, thrashing, into the darkness. The remaining crew scream, some dropping their oars in panic. But there is no time for grief, no time for fear to take root. The ship, momentarily out of control as the rowers falter, lurches violently. The terrifying, sucking roar of Charybdis is now deafening, directly ahead of them. The Pylos is caught in the outer edges of the forming whirlpool, spinning, being drawn inexorably towards the dark, churning vortex that promises a watery grave for them all. Lycaon fights the steering oar, his muscles screaming, his eyes fixed on the monstrous gaping hole in the sea that is growing larger with every passing second, threatening to swallow them to an oblivion from which there is no return. The bow of the Pylos dips precariously, the black, swirling water already licking at the foredeck. The cries of his remaining men, a desperate chorus against the thunder of the abyss. Jormungandr, the world serpent. Let us cast our gaze back to the dawn of ages in the realm of Asgard, the shining citadel of the Aesir gods, a place of golden halls and Bifrost's shimmering arch. Yet even here, amidst divine splendor, shadows could fall, and prophecies of doom were whispered on the winds that swept down from the peaks of Yggdrasil, the world tree. For in the shadowy land of Jotunheimr, The realm of giants, the trickster god Loki, ever a source of mischief and often malice, had fathered 3 monstrous children, with the giantess Angerboda, she who brings sorrow. These were no ordinary offspring. First was the colossal wolf Fenrir, whose hunger was insatiable and whose strength grew with every passing day. Second was Hel, a being half beautiful woman, half decaying corpse, destined to rule over the dishonorable dead in the icy realm of Niflheim. And the third, born from that unholy union, was a serpent. But this was no common snake, no mere viper of the fields. From the moment of its hatching, it was clear this creature was an abomination of terrifying potential. Its scales were the color of a stormy sea, a shifting pattern of deep blues, greens, and bruised purples, each one as large as a warrior's shield, and harder than dragon scale. Its eyes, even in infancy, held a cold, ancient light, unblinking and filled with a primal venom that promised a slow, agonizing death. It grew at an alarming rate, its coils thickening, its length extending, until it became a source of profound unease even to its monstrous kin. Word of these terrifying progeny reached Odin, the Allfather, wise and far-seeing, who sat upon his high throne Hlidskjalf, from which he could survey all the 9 worlds. The prophecies, the ancient runes, spoke of these children of Loki playing a devastating role in Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, the cataclysmic end of all things. Fearful of their burgeoning power and the doom they heralded, Odin decreed that these monstrous siblings must be dealt with. Tyr, the bravest of the gods, managed to bind Fenrir, though it cost him his hand. Hel was cast down into the depths of Niflheim to rule over the dead, and for Jormungandr, Odin reserved a unique fate. He seized the young serpent, already grown to a horrifying size, its thrashing coils capable of crushing stone, its fangs dripping with a venom so potent it sizzled upon the ground. With a mighty heave, born of divine strength and grim necessity, the Allfather hurled the monstrous serpent from the heights of Asgard, down through the swirling mists that separated the realms, and into the vast, dark, and largely uncharted ocean that encircled Midgard, the world of mortals. Down, down, Jormungandr plunged, a falling star of scales and fury, until it crashed into the deepest trenches of that worldly sea. There, in the sunless abyss, surrounded by the crushing pressure and the eternal silence, the serpent did not perish. Instead, it thrived. It grew and grew and grew. Fed by the strange, dark energies of the deep ocean and its own innate, monstrous vitality, Jormungandr expanded at an impossible rate. Its coils unraveled, stretching for leagues, then hundreds of leagues, then thousands. It became a living, breathing mountain range beneath the waves, its movements causing earthquakes and tsunamis on the distant shores of Midgard. So vast did Jormungandr become that eventually its colossal, serpentine body encircled the entirety of Midgard. It lay in the abyssal depths, a self-contained ocean within the ocean, its immense head coming to rest before its own thrashing tail. And there, in the eternal darkness, it bit down upon that tail, forming an unbroken, living ring around the world of humankind. The Midgard serpent, the world serpent, Jormungandr. Its breath became the tides, its shifting coils the ocean currents. The world of mortals was, quite literally, held within its venomous embrace. For long ages, Jormungandr lay thus, a slumbering world encircling dread, largely unseen by mortals, though sailors would whisper tales of impossible waves that rose from calm seas, of glimpses of scales so vast they mistook them for chains of islands, of a chilling, venomous aura that would sometimes permeate the air far from land. But the gods of Asgard had not forgotten Loki's monstrous child, and one god, in particular, held a special enmity for the world serpent. This was Thor, the mighty thunderer, Odin's son, wielder of the enchanted hammer Mjolnir, a god of immense strength, boundless courage, and a somewhat fiery temper. Thor and Jörmungandr were destined to be mortal enemies, their fates intertwined, their final cataclysmic confrontation foretold to be a cornerstone of Ragnarok. One famous tale tells of Thor's desire to test his strength against the serpent. Disguised as a young man, he went on a fishing trip with the giant Hymir. Hymir, reluctant to take this boisterous youth too far out to sea, was nonetheless goaded by Thor's taunts. Thor, with his divine strength, rowed them far beyond Hymir's usual fishing grounds, out into the deepest, darkest part of the ocean where the giant feared to tread. For bait, Thor used the head of Hymir's largest ox, a gruesome and potent lure. He fashioned a fishing line of incredible strength and a hook that was more like an anchor. He cast this monstrous bait into the abyssal depths. The silence stretched, broken only by the creak of Hymir's small boat and the giant's nervous muttering. Thor waited, his knuckles white on the line, a grim smile playing on his lips. Then the line went taut. Not with the tug of an ordinary fish, but with a pull so immense, so powerful, that the boat itself groaned and threatened to splinter. Thor braced himself, his divine muscles bulging, his feet planted firmly on the thwarts. He began to pull, hand over hand, his strength pitted against something of unimaginable weight and fury. The sea around them began to churn, to boil as if a submerged volcano were erupting. Hymir, his face pale with terror, began to scream, recognizing the signs, knowing what manner of creature Thor had hooked. Slowly, agonizingly, Thor drew his catch upwards. The strain was incredible. The boat was being pulled down, the waves crashing over the gunwales, but the thunder god would not yield. And then, from the roiling dark water, a head began to emerge. A head so vast it blotted out the horizon, its scales shimmering with an oily, venomous light, its eyes like burning coals, filled with an ancient, reptilian fury. Jörmungandr, the world serpent, had taken the bait. Its immense fanged maw gaped, the ox head still impaled on Thor's mighty hook. Venom, black and steaming, dripped from its fangs, sizzling as it hit the water, creating clouds of acrid smoke. The serpent thrashed, its movement sending mountainous waves crashing around the tiny boat, threatening to swamp it. Hymir, gibbering with fear, fumbled for his knife, intending to cut the line, but Thor roared in triumph and fury, his eyes blazing with a warrior's joy. He held the line fast, and as Jörmungandr's monstrous head rose higher, its dripping jaws almost level with the boat, Thor reached for Mjolnir, his hammer, which flew to his hand. He raised it high, ready to deliver a killing blow, to shatter that colossal, venomous skull. The air crackled with anticipation. The sea itself seemed to hold its breath as the god of thunder prepared to strike the world serpent in a battle that could crack the foundations of Midgard. The hammer began its descent, aimed directly between those baleful, burning eyes, promising a cataclysmic impact that would echo through all the 9 worlds. Mermaids and sirens, a symphony of sea-bound souls and fatal shores. Let us drift back to an age when the world felt boundless, and the vast, untamed oceans held as many secrets as they did stars in their inky depths. Upon these waters, brave mariners sailed, their wooden vessels mere specks against the immensity, their hearts often heavy with the loneliness of long voyages, their minds susceptible to the enchantments that the sea in its capricious moods might conjure. From countless cultures, across sun-drenched archipelagos and along mist-shrouded coastlines, tales have emerged, whispered in hushed tones around flickering tavern fires, or sung in mournful shanties on the creaking decks of ships far from home. Tales of beings, half human, half aquatic, whose beauty was as profound as the ocean itself, and whose voices could weave spells of irresistible allure. These were the mermaids, the sirens, names often used interchangeably, yet sometimes hinting at subtle, dangerous distinctions. Imagine a ship, let's call her the Seafoam Dancer, captained by a young, adventurous soul named Alexios. His vessel is returning from a perilous journey, laden with exotic spices and silks from the Far East. The crew, weary from months at sea, dream of familiar shores, of warm embraces and the taste of home-cooked food. The sun is beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the western sky in hues of fiery orange, soft rose, and deepening violet. A gentle breeze fills the sails, carrying with it the scent of salt and something else, something indefinably sweet and intoxicating. The sea is calm, like polished glass reflecting the vibrant sunset. It is that magical hour between day and night, when the veil between worlds is said to be at its thinnest. A lookout, perched high in the crow's nest, a lad named Theron with eyes as sharp as a hawk's, suddenly cries out, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief, "Captain, land, ho, or something wondrous!" All eyes turn. Nestled in a secluded cove where jagged dark rocks jutted from the turquoise water like the teeth of some ancient sea beast, they saw them. At first it was just a flash of movement, a glint of something bright upon the shadowed stones. Then, as the sea-foam dancer drifted closer, drawn by an unseen current or perhaps by a more subtle, insidious pull, the figures became clearer. They were women, or so they appeared from the waist up, of such unearthly beauty that the hearts of the hardened sailors seemed to stop in their chests. Their hair, the color of spun moonlight, or midnight seaweed, or fiery coral, cascaded around their bare shoulders, glistening with sea spray. Their skin seemed to shimmer with an inner luminescence, as if they were sculpted from pearl and moonbeams. Their eyes, large and luminous, held an expression of gentle invitation, of profound ancient wisdom, and a hint of playful mischief. And from their lips, from their lips came a sound that transcended mere music. It was a song, a melody so pure, so achingly beautiful, that it seemed to pluck at the very strings of each man's soul. It spoke of forgotten joys, of deepest longings, of a peace and a pleasure beyond mortal comprehension. It was a sound that promised an end to all weariness, a balm for every sorrow, an embrace of eternal bliss. The notes wove through the air like silken threads, wrapping around the sailors, drawing them in. Their faces, moments before etched with fatigue and longing for home, now transformed by expressions of rapturous, almost painful ecstasy. Alexios, the captain, felt it too. The song seeped into his mind, dissolving his resolve, his duty, his very sense of self. The ship, his crew, the spices in his hold, all faded into insignificance before the overwhelming, consuming desire to reach the source of that celestial music, to gaze upon those divine beings, to lose himself in the promise of their otherworldly embrace. He forgot the treacherous, reef-strewn waters of the cove. He forgot the tales his grandmother used to tell. Tales of beautiful sea women who lured sailors to their doom upon jagged rocks. The mermaids, or sirens, for who could tell the difference in that moment of enchantment, reclined upon the rocks, their lower halves shimmering with scales of emerald, sapphire, and silver, trailing gracefully in the lapping water. They beckoned with slender white arms, their smiles radiant, their eyes holding a hypnotic allure. Some held lyres fashioned from mother of pearl, others combs of polished coral with which they groomed their flowing tresses, their movements fluid and mesmerizing. The sea-foam dancer drifted closer, closer. The sailors, as if in a trance, began to abandon their posts. Some climbed into the rigging, straining for a better view, their faces alight with a fervent, almost religious devotion. Others simply stood at the rail, tears streaming unheeded down their weathered cheeks, their hands outstretched towards the enchanting figures. Theron, the young lookout, was already halfway down the rigging, his eyes fixed, his lips parted in a silent gasp of adoration. Alexios found himself at the ship's prow, his hand gripping the rail so tightly his knuckles were white. Yet he felt no pain, only an overwhelming, intoxicating pull. The song intensified, swirling around him, filling his senses, promising everything his heart had ever desired. He could almost feel the cool touch of their skin, the silken caress of their hair, the blissful oblivion of their embrace. The jagged rocks, now terrifyingly close, seemed to recede from his perception, transformed by the enchantment into welcoming steps leading to paradise. One of the figures on the rocks, perhaps the most beautiful of them all, her hair the color of a sun-drenched beach, her eyes the deep, mysterious blue of the abyss, lifted a hand. Her lips parted, and her voice, a solo line in the captivating chorus, seemed to call directly to Alexios, a melody that promised him secrets of the deep, eternal youth, and a love that would transcend the mortal coil. He took a step, then another, his foot hovering over the rail, ready to plunge into the inviting, shimmering water, to swim towards that irresistible call, towards that fatal, beautiful shore. The ship was now mere feet from the first line of razor-sharp rocks, hidden just beneath the surface, their dark, menacing shapes barely visible through the clear, turquoise water, and a low, guttural scraping sound, like stone grinding against wood, began to emanate from beneath the hull, a sound that was almost, but not quite, drowned out by the celestial, all-consuming song. Flying Dutchman, ghost galleon of the accursed Cape, let us cast our minds back to the age of sail, an era of daring exploration and perilous voyages, when tall ships like graceful, winged creatures braved the immensity of the world's oceans in pursuit of riches, glory, or simply a passage to a new life. Among the many brave and reckless captains who plied these dangerous waters, there was one whose name would become synonymous with eternal damnation and spectral terror: Captain Hendrik van der Decken. Van der Decken was a man carved from the very gales he so often challenged. Tall and gaunt, with eyes like chips of flint, and a beard as wild and untamed as the storms he navigated, he was a master mariner, renowned for his skill, his iron will, and his unyielding, often brutal determination. His ship, the Amsterdam, was a magnificent East Indiaman, a veritable fortress of oak and canvas, her holds often groaning with the silks, spices, and treasures of the Orient. But Van der Decken was a man driven by more than just profit. He was driven by a fierce, unbending pride, a stubborn refusal to be thwarted by any obstacle, be it man, nature, or, as fate would have it, God himself. Our tale finds the Amsterdam on a return voyage from the distant, fragrant lands of Batavia, her destination the bustling ports of Holland. She was heavily laden, her crew weary, but anticipating the joys of home and the rewards of their long toil. All that stood between them and their beloved Amsterdam was the most treacherous passage known to sailors of that time. The infamous Cape of Good Hope, a name that often rang hollow, for it was more widely and more accurately known as the Cape of Storms. As they approached this formidable southern tip of Africa, the sky, which had been a clear, hopeful blue, began to curdle. Great bruised clouds, the color of lead and old blood, massed on the horizon, pregnant with a furious elemental rage. The wind, at first a playful breeze, began to moan through the rigging, then to shriek like a legion of tormented souls. The sea, once a gentle swell, rose into mountainous black waves, their crests like jagged white teeth, eager to devour any vessel foolish enough to challenge their might. The Amsterdam was tossed about like a child's toy. Rain lashed down in blinding sheets, stinging the faces of the crew and turning the decks into treacherous, slippery inclines. Thunder cracked with the sound of splitting worlds, and lightning, in jagged, violet spears, illuminated the terrifying, chaotic scene, revealing the sheer, desperate struggle of the ship against the unleashed fury of the ocean. The timbers of the Amsterdam groaned and shrieked as if in agony. The sails were ripped to shreds despite the crew's frantic efforts to furl them, and the waves crashed over the bow, sweeping across the deck, threatening to wash men overboard into the churning black abyss. The crew, seasoned sailors though they were, began to lose heart. They pleaded with Captain Van der Decken to turn back, to seek shelter in some bay, to wait out the storm's demonic fury. They spoke of omens, of the unnatural violence of the tempest, of the Cape's hunger for ships and souls. But Van der Decken, his face a mask of grim determination, his oilskins plastered to his gaunt frame, stood upon his quarterdeck, gripping the rail, his eyes blazing with a defiant fire. He would not be beaten. He would not turn back. The Cape would yield to him. As the storm reached its crescendo, a wave of truly colossal proportions, a veritable moving mountain of black water, rose before them, its crest foaming like the slavering jaws of some unimaginable sea beast, threatening to engulf them entirely. Fear, raw and primal, gripped the hearts of the crew. They fell to their knees, praying, crying out to their gods, their saints, for deliverance. But Captain Van der Decken, his voice a roar that somehow cut through the howl of the wind and the thunder of the waves, raised a clenched fist to the tumultuous, lightning-streaked sky. "I will round this cape," he bellowed, his words laced with a furious, blasphemous resolve. "Even if I have to sail until Judgment Day, may God strike me down, may the devil take my soul, but I will round this cape." No sooner had these defiant, accursed words left his lips than a chilling, unnatural silence fell upon the heart of the storm. The wind, for a moment, seemed to hold its breath. The mountainous wave, poised to crash down upon them, appeared to freeze, suspended in an impossible, terrifying tableau. And in that eerie, pregnant pause, a voice, some say, was heard. A voice that was not of the storm, nor of any mortal man, but a voice that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the enraged elements, or perhaps from some higher, offended power. It pronounced his doom. "Sail on then, Captain, sail on forever. You shall round your cape, but never shall you make port. Your ship shall be your coffin, the storm your eternal companion, and your presence a curse to all who sight you." Then the wave crashed down. But the Amsterdam did not sink. It did not shatter. Instead, it passed through the maelstrom, battered and broken, yet impossibly afloat. The storm continued to rage around them, but now it felt different. Imbued with a chilling, supernatural malevolence, the crew, those who had survived the initial onslaught, looked at their captain with eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. They were no longer fighting a mere storm. They were caught in the grip of a divine curse, shackled to a damned captain and a doomed ship. And so, the legend of the Flying Dutchman was born. Captain Van der Decken, true to his terrible vow and the subsequent curse, was condemned to sail the seas for eternity, forever battling the phantom storms around the Cape of Good Hope, never to find rest, never to touch land. His ship, the Amsterdam, became a spectral galleon, its timbers perpetually groaning, its tattered sails forever billowing with an unseen, unholy wind. Her crew, gaunt and spectral figures, were doomed to share their captain's fate, their faces etched with an eternity of despair, forever toiling at their ghostly tasks, their silent suffering a chilling testament to their captain's hubris. Through the centuries, sailors from every nation have whispered tales of sighting the Dutchman. It is often seen in the teeth of a gale, glowing with an eerie, phosphorescent light, its spectral form sailing impossibly against the fiercest winds or appearing suddenly out of a fog bank, a silent, terrifying harbinger of doom. To see the Flying Dutchman is considered the direst of omens, a sure sign of impending shipwreck or disaster. Sometimes, it is said, the ghostly crew will attempt to hail other ships, trying to pass on letters to loved ones long dead, letters that no mortal hand should ever touch, for to accept them is to invite the curse upon oneself. Imagine now another vessel, centuries later, a small battered whaling ship, the Hope's anchor, limping its way towards the Cape after a long and arduous hunt in the frigid southern oceans. A fierce storm has been raging for days, and Captain Elias Thorne, a weary, God-fearing man, is at his wits' end. The wind howls like a banshee, the waves are like liquid mountains, and his ship is taking on water. His crew are exhausted, their faces pale with fatigue and fear. Suddenly, through a momentary break in the driving rain and swirling mist, young Thomas, the cabin boy, clinging to the rigging for dear life, lets out a strangled cry, his finger pointing with a trembling hand off the port bow. "Captain! A light! Another ship!" Captain Thorne strains his eyes against the tempest, and there, impossibly, he sees it. A faint, sickly green glow coalescing into the distinct shape of a tall ship, an ancient galleon, its masts stark against the storm-racked sky. It is sailing with an unnatural speed, seemingly unperturbed by the monstrous waves that are threatening to tear his own vessel apart. It is heading directly towards them. Its tattered sails, though no wind should fill them in that manner, are drawing it closer, closer. On its high quarterdeck, a tall, gaunt figure can be discerned, unmoving, staring out into the storm, with eyes that seem to burn with an unholy light. The spectral ship makes no sound, save for the faint, mournful creak of ancient timbers, a sound that seems to carry on the wind, a lament for an eternity of suffering. The Hope's anchor is directly in its path, and the ghostly galleon, the Flying Dutchman itself, shows no sign of altering its accursed course, its prow aimed like a spectral lance at their very hearts. Leviathan, the serpent king of the primal sea, let us journey back, beyond the reach of common memory, to a time when the world was younger, rawer, and the great oceans were vast, uncharted realms of mystery and peril. In those days, when humanity huddled close to familiar shores, the sea was not merely a body of water, but a living, breathing entity, capable of serene beauty and sudden, cataclysmic fury. And within its deepest, most hidden chambers, it was said, dwelled beings of unimaginable power, creations that predated mankind, titans of an earlier, more chaotic epoch. Among these, none was more feared, more revered, or more shrouded in awe than Leviathan. This was no mere sea serpent, though serpent it was in its endless coiling form. This was a creature woven into the very fabric of creation myths. A being of such colossal proportions that it was said its coils could encircle the entire earth, its tail held fast in its own mighty jaws, forming an unbroken ring around the terrestrial world. Imagine, if you can, scales that were not like those of ordinary fish or reptiles, but rather like 1,000 interlocking shields, each one harder than tempered steel, polished by the relentless pressure of the abyssal, deep to a dark, obsidian sheen that seemed to drink the light. When Leviathan moved through the sunless depths, these scales would ripple like a field of black diamonds, catching and refracting any stray luminescence from phosphorescent creatures, creating an eerie, shifting aurora in its wake. Its eyes, they say, were not mere organs of sight, but twin furnaces of baleful light, burning with an ancient cold fire, like stars fallen from a forgotten cosmos and drowned in the endless night of the sea. To gaze into those eyes was to feel the weight of eons, to witness an intelligence as vast and indifferent as the ocean itself. From its cavernous nostrils, it was whispered, would issue forth not mere breath, but plumes of superheated steam and sulphurous smoke that could boil the surface of the sea for leagues around, creating treacherous, scalding fog banks that would ensnare unwary ships. And its voice, though few, if any, could claim to have heard it and lived to tell the tale, the ancient texts and trembling sagas speak of it as a sound that was not merely heard, but felt. A vibration that could shake the foundations of islands, a resonance that could shatter the strongest timbers and crumble the resolve of the most steadfast hearts. It was the groan of the earth's core, the roar of 1,000 tempests combined, the very sound of primordial chaos given utterance. Consider a Phoenician trading galley, its single square sail fat with the Mediterranean breeze, its hull laden with precious cedar wood, Tyrian purple dye, and amphorae of rich wine. The captain, a man named Bol Melkart, weathered and wise, with eyes that had seen more sunrises over the sea than most men had seen days, believed he knew every current, every reef, every whim of his beloved great sea. His vessel, the Star of Ashera, was his pride, swift and sturdy, They had been at sea for many weeks, far from the familiar coastline of Tyre, charting a new route to the tin mines of distant Tarshish. The days were long and sun-drenched, the nights cool and spangled with a million stars. A sense of prosperity and adventure filled the ship. But one evening, as the sun bled a fiery orange into the western waves, the sea began to change. The familiar rhythmic swell faltered. The water grew unnaturally smooth, like polished obsidian, reflecting the bruised colors of the sunset with a disturbing clarity. A hush fell, not just upon the ship, but upon the world. The cries of the seabirds ceased. The gentle sigh of the wind through the rigging died away. Even the creak of the Star of Asherah's timbers seemed muted, as if the ship itself held its breath. Baal Melkart felt a prickling on his skin, an ancient unease that had nothing to do with storms or pirates. He had heard the old tales, the dockside whispers from trembling-lipped sailors who had returned from voyages with haunted eyes and stories of impossible encounters in the deep. Leviathan. He had always dismissed them as the fancies of drink-sodden minds or the exaggerations of frightened men. But now, the sea before them, to the west, where the last sliver of the sun was drowning, began to darken, not with the natural fall of night, but with an encroaching shadow that seemed to rise from beneath the waves, spreading like a vast underwater stain. Then, the surface began to bulge, not in a single place, but over an area so vast it defied comprehension. It was as if a submerged mountain range was slowly, deliberately pushing its way towards the air. A young sailor, his face a mask of dawning terror, pointed a shaking finger. "Master, the sea! It boils!" And indeed the water in that vast, shadowed area began to churn and seethe, not with heat, but with an immense internal agitation. Great plumes of spray erupted, hissing like 1,000 angry snakes. The Star of Asherah, caught in an invisible, irresistible current, began to be drawn towards this terrifying spectacle, its rudder useless against the unseen power. Baal Melkart roared orders, his voice cracking with a fear he had never known. "Hard to port! All hands to the oars! Row, you dogs! Row for the shores of Sheol itself if you must, but turn her!" But the men were frozen, their eyes wide with a primal horror that transcended discipline. For now, from the churning chaos, a shape was beginning to resolve itself. An arch, so colossal it seemed to span the horizon, a curve of glistening black that rose out of the sea, higher than any cliff, wider than any island they had ever known. It was a section of the creature's back, each individual scale the size of their ship's deck, reflecting the dying light in a million sinister glints. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of brine and something else, something ancient and metallic, like the smell of a deep wound in the earth. The Star of Asherah was now terrifyingly close, a mere toy boat at the foot of this living mountain range of flesh. And as they watched, helpless, another section of the colossal serpent began to rise, further out, and then another and another, until it seemed the entire western ocean was filled with the impossible, undulating coils of this single, world-encircling behemoth. Then, from the water directly ahead of their bow, a new horror. The sea parted, and from the depths ascended the head of Leviathan. It was a sight to shatter the sanity of any mortal. Larger than any temple, its vast reptilian skull was armored with plates of chitinous bone, and from its immense jaws lined with teeth like upturned longboats, a low, guttural hiss escaped, a sound that vibrated through their very bones, promising an agonizing, inevitable doom. And its eyes, those two burning embers, each one a swirling vortex of ancient malice and unfathomable power, fixed upon their tiny, insignificant vessel. Baal Melkart felt his legs tremble, his famed courage turning to water. He saw in those eyes not mere hunger, but an ancient cosmic disdain for all that was small and fleeting. The Star of Asherah was pulled closer, closer until they were directly beneath that titanic, gaping maw, the shadow of its upper jaw falling over them like the lid of a monstrous coffin. A hot, fetid breath, smelling of the deepest, darkest parts of the ocean and the crushed bones of forgotten creatures washed over them. Baal Melkart closed his eyes, a silent prayer to every god he knew on his lips, as the colossal head began to descend, slowly, deliberately, to claim its insignificant prize. Umebozu, the sea monk of sudden doom. Let us set our sails for the coastal waters of ancient Japan, a land of rugged beauty where volcanic mountains kiss the clouds and the sea, in its myriad moods, has shaped the lives and beliefs of its people for millennia. Here, fishermen in their small, sturdy kobuna, their livelihoods wrested daily from the ocean's grasp, knew that the sea was not merely a source of sustenance, but a realm of powerful, often capricious spirits. Among the many yokai, or supernatural beings that were said to haunt the waves, none inspired such sudden, chilling dread as the Umebozu, literally, the sea monk. This was no creature of flesh and blood, no beast of scale or fin. The Umebozu was a spirit, an apparition, a manifestation of the drowned, of those who had met their end in the cold, dark embrace of the sea, their souls perhaps twisted by bitterness, by loneliness, or by the sheer terrifying power of their watery grave. Imagine a fishing vessel, let us call it the Akatsuki Maru, the Dawn Star, captained by a seasoned fisherman named Kenzo, a man whose face was a roadmap of sun and salt, whose hands were calloused from years of hauling nets and battling storms. His crew, a small band of hardy men, knew the rhythms of the sea as well as they knew their own heartbeats. They had set out before dawn, under a sky spangled with 1,000,000 stars, the sea a calm, dark mirror reflecting the celestial display. The fishing had been good, their nets heavy with silvery bounty, and a mood of quiet contentment filled the small vessel as they began their journey back to their village nestled in a sheltered cove. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the western sky in hues of fiery orange and soft lavender. The sea was unnaturally calm, almost glassy, the air still and heavy. Not a breath of wind stirred the surface, and the Akatsuki Maru moved slowly, propelled by the rhythmic splash of its oars, for the sails hung limp and useless. This profound stillness, which on another day might have been welcomed, now felt strangely oppressive, almost suffocating. Kenzo, standing at the tiller, felt a prickle of unease on his skin. He had seen such calms before, and they often presaged a sudden squall or some other treachery of the sea. He scanned the horizon, his keen eyes searching for any sign of changing weather, but there was nothing. Only the vast, empty expanse of the ocean, reflecting the dying light with an eerie, mirror-like perfection. One of the younger fishermen, Taro, who was coiling ropes at the bow, suddenly let out a low gasp, his eyes wide with a dawning fear. "Captain, look! The water!" All eyes turned to where Taro pointed. Ahead of them, the smooth, glassy surface of the sea was beginning to darken, not with a shadow cast by a cloud, for the sky was clear, but with a deep, inky blackness that seemed to well up from the depths, spreading outwards like a monstrous underwater bruise. The air grew colder, and a faint, almost imperceptible smell, like stagnant water and old decaying wood, drifted towards them. The blackness intensified, coalescing into a distinct, circular shape directly in their path, and then, from the center of this dark patch, the water began to rise, not in a wave, not in a surge, but as a smooth, cohesive column, as if an immense invisible cylinder were being pushed up from the seabed. Higher and higher it rose, silent and inexorable, until it towered over their small vessel, a pillar of black, unholy water. The men of the Akatsuki Maru were frozen in terror, their oars trailing uselessly in the water, their faces pale masks of disbelief and horror. They knew the tales. They knew what this portended. Then the column of water began to take shape. It solidified, or so it seemed, into a colossal, vaguely humanoid form. It was a giant, shadowy figure, its surface like polished obsidian, smooth and featureless, save for two large, round, glowing orbs that appeared where eyes should be. Eyes that burned with a cold, empty light, devoid of any recognizable emotion, yet filled with an ancient, chilling menace. The head was smooth and round, like the shaven pate of a Buddhist monk, giving the creature its name, Umibozu. Its body was indistinct, a towering pillar of darkness that seemed to merge with the sea itself. It made no sound, no roar, no hiss, only an overwhelming, silent presence that crushed the spirit and froze the blood. The Umibozu loomed over the Akatsuki Maru, its immense, shadowy form blotting out the last vestiges of the sunset, plunging them into a premature, terrifying twilight. Kenzo, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, knew they were doomed. The tales said that to encounter the Umibozu was to face certain death. The spirit was said to rise from the sea, often on calm nights like this, and demand a barrel or a ladle from any ship it encountered. If the sailors complied, the Umibozu would use the offered vessel to scoop up seawater and pour it into their boat, swamping it, sinking it, and dragging its unfortunate crew down into the cold, dark depths to join its legion of drowned souls. The colossal, shadowy head of the Umibozu slowly tilted, its glowing eyes fixing upon their small, terrified vessel. A ripple went through its dark, watery form, and then a voice. It was not a voice of words, not a sound that vibrated the air, but rather a thought, a command that implanted itself directly into their minds, cold and clear and utterly terrifying. "Give me a barrel." The men looked at each other, their faces etched with despair. They had barrels aboard, barrels for fish, barrels for fresh water. To refuse was unthinkable. The Umibozu was a powerful spirit, and to anger it would surely mean an even swifter, more terrible demise. But to comply was to seal their fate, to offer the very instrument of their destruction. Kenzo, his mind racing, remembered an old, half-forgotten piece of lore, a desperate gamble his grandfather, also a fisherman, had once mentioned. He barked an order, his voice hoarse with fear, but firm with a sliver of desperate hope. "Taro! The spare net ladle! The one with the broken bottom! Quickly!" Taro, startled but obedient, scrambled to fetch the large wooden ladle they used for bailing water or scooping small fish. Its bottom latticework damaged and full of holes. He handed it to Kenzo, his hands trembling so violently he almost dropped it. The Umibozu waited, its glowing eyes fixed upon them, its immense silent presence an unbearable weight. The mental command came again, more insistent this time. "A vessel! Now!" Kenzo took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He held up the broken ladle, its uselessness a stark, desperate plea. He knew this was their only chance, a fragile shield of cleverness against an ocean of spiritual might. The colossal, shadowy head of the sea monk tilted again, its glowing eyes seeming to narrow slightly as it regarded the offered item. A long, silent moment stretched, each second an eternity, the fate of the Akatsuki Maru and her crew hanging precariously in the balance, dependent on the whim of this ancient, vengeful spirit of the deep. The glowing eyes of the Umibozu seemed to pulse, and a low, guttural rumble, like distant thunder or the grinding of colossal stones, began to emanate from its shadowy form, a sound that promised either acceptance or utter, swift annihilation. Hydra, the serpent of endless nightmares, let us cast our thoughts back to an age of myth and legend, where the heroes of old strode the earth, their names echoing through the annals of time. Among these none shone brighter, nor faced greater trials than the mighty Heracles, son of Zeus, blessed with strength that surpassed all mortal men, yet cursed by the jealous wrath of Hera, queen of the gods. It was this divine animosity that set Heracles upon his 12 infamous labors, tasks designed to be impossible, to break his spirit and his body. Our story takes us to the Argolid, to the humid, fetid swamplands that lay near the ancient settlement of Lerna. This was no pleasant, sun-kissed marsh. It was a place of stagnant, black water where the air hung heavy with the stench of decay and the buzz of a million biting insects. Twisted, skeletal trees rose from the murky depths, their branches draped with slimy moss, and the ground itself was a treacherous quagmire, sucking at the feet of any unwary traveler. It was a place shunned by sensible folk, a realm where fever and ill omen festered, and it was here, in a dark, echoing cave beneath a gnarled plane tree near the very springs of Amimoni, that the Hydra made its lair. This was no common serpent. The Lernaean Hydra was a monstrous offspring of Typhon, the colossal, storm-breathing giant who had once challenged Zeus himself for dominion over the cosmos, and Echidna, a creature half-beautiful nymph, half-speckled, horrifying snake, the mother of many of the most terrible monsters to plague the ancient world. From such parentage, only terror could be spawned. The Hydra was a water serpent of immense size, its thick, scaly body the color of mud and old blood, coiling and uncoiling with a sickening, fluid grace. But its most terrifying feature was not its bulk, but its heads. Accounts vary, as they often do in tales passed down through the ages, but most agree it possessed at least 5, some say 9, and others whisper of 100 writhing, serpentine necks, each crowned with a hideous fanged head. These heads darted and weaved, their forked tongues flicking, their eyes like chips of obsidian, gleaming with a cold reptilian malice. And if its appearance was not enough to curdle the blood, the Hydra possessed 2 other deadly attributes. Its breath was a cloud of pestilence, a venomous vapor so potent that its mere scent could bring sickness and death to any living thing that drew too near. Even the tracks it left upon the blighted earth were said to exude this lethal poison, contaminating the land and water around its lair, but most fearsome of all was its regenerative power. For every one of its ghastly heads that was severed, 2 more, even more furious and venomous, would spring forth from the bleeding stump, making any direct assault seem not only futile, but disastrously counterproductive. And one of these heads, the central one, some whispered, was immortal, incapable of being destroyed by any mortal means. It was this multi-headed, venom-breathing, regenerating nightmare that King Eurystheus, Heracles' taskmaster, gleefully assigned as the hero's second labor. He imagined Heracles, for all his famed strength, succumbing to the Hydra's poison or being overwhelmed by its endlessly multiplying heads, his mighty corpse sinking into the fetid swamp, forgotten. Heracles, ever resolute, did not flinch from the task. He journeyed to Lerna, accompanied by his loyal nephew, Iolaus, a brave youth eager to aid his heroic uncle. As they approached the swamps, the air grew thick and cloying, the stench of the Hydra's presence assaulting their nostrils. The land around them was blighted, trees withered, birds silent, a testament to the creature's poisonous aura. Guided by Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare, Heracles first sought to draw the Hydra from its dark, subterranean lair. He dipped arrows in flaming pitch and fired them into the cave, the smoke and heat designed to agitate the beast. For a long moment, there was only the crackle of the flames and the hiss of the burning brands. Then, from the depths of the cave, came a sound that chilled even Heracles' stout heart. A chorus of sibilant hisses, a dry, rasping slither, and the ground itself seemed to tremble. The Hydra emerged, a writhing mountain of scales and fury, its multiple heads swaying hypnotically, their eyes fixed upon the intruders. Its venomous breath billowed forth, a visible, greenish-yellow cloud that withered the grass at Heracles' feet. The hero, holding his breath and covering his mouth and nose with a cloth, a trick also suggested by Athena, charged forward, his famed lion-skin cloak billowing behind him, his mighty club, carved from a single olive tree, held ready. The battle was joined. Heracles, with his godlike strength, brought his club crashing down upon one of the Hydra's heads, crushing it with a sickening thud. But even as black, Icarus blood spurted from the mangled stump, two new heads, smaller but no less vicious, instantly sprouted in its place, their fangs bared, their hisses filled with renewed fury. He struck again and again, the same horrifying result. For every head he obliterated, two more took its place, the writhing mass of serpentine necks growing ever more dense, their attacks more frenzied. The Hydra's coils lashed out, attempting to ensnare Heracles, to drag him down into the mire. Its venomous breath was a constant threat, forcing him to fight with a desperate, lung-burning intensity. Iolaus watched in growing horror, seeing his uncle, the invincible Heracles, beginning to be overwhelmed by the sheer, unending tide of monstrous heads. It seemed an impossible, unwinnable fight. But Iolaus, though young, was quick-witted. He remembered tales of how fire could sear wounds and prevent regrowth. As Heracles, panting and sweating, paused for a fraction of a second after smashing another pair of heads, only to see four more spring forth, Iolaus cried out, "Uncle, the fire! We must sear the necks as you strike!" Heracles, his mind focused on the brutal, relentless combat, had not thought of it. He roared his approval. Iolaus, grabbing a burning torch from the fire they had made, rushed forward. Now, as Heracles brought his mighty club down upon a Hydra head, shattering it into pulp, Iolaus, with incredible bravery, darted in, thrusting the blazing torch against the bleeding, severed stump. The flesh sizzled and blackened, the ichor bubbled, and to their immense relief no new heads sprang forth. The tide of the battle began to turn. Heracles, reinvigorated by this new strategy, fought with renewed ferocity. Club crashed, torch seared. One by one, the Hydra's mortal heads were destroyed, their regenerative power nullified by the cleansing fire. The air filled with the stench of burning flesh and venom, the ground littered with the charred, lifeless remnants of the monster's many craniums. Finally, only one head remained, the central head. The one whispered to be immortal. It was larger than the others, its scales gleaming with a sickly, golden light, its eyes burning with an unquenchable, ancient hatred. Heracles struck it with all his prodigious might, the club connecting with a sound like thunder. The immortal head was dazed, momentarily stunned, but it was not destroyed. It still lived, its fangs bared, its venomous breath still a threat. Heracles knew that even severed, this head would remain a deadly peril. With a mighty effort, he sliced it from the Hydra's now headless, thrashing body. The coils of the great serpent writhed one last time in a colossal, earth-shaking spasm, and then lay still, its reign of terror over. But the immortal head, still snapping and hissing, lay upon the ground, its venomous aura potent. Heracles, with Iolaus's help, managed to bury it deep beneath a heavy rock by the side of the road that ran through Lerna, ensuring it could harm no one else. Yet even buried, its malevolence, its immortal poison, was said to linger. And Heracles, his labor seemingly complete, dipped his arrows into the Hydra's black, venomous blood, imbuing them with a poison so deadly that the slightest scratch would mean a slow, agonizing, and inescapable death. He did not yet know how profoundly these poisoned arrows would shape his own destiny, nor the terrible price that might one day be paid for wielding such a deadly taint, a venom born from a creature whose every part, even in death, seemed to promise only suffering and despair. The hero stood, weary but triumphant, the stench of the vanquished monster clinging to him, unaware that the true poison of the Hydra might yet find a way to seep into his very soul. Lusca, the terror of the sapphire depths. Let us cast our senses to the sun-kissed archipelago of the Bahamas, a realm of dazzling white sand beaches, swaying palm trees, and waters so clear they seem to hold the very sky captive. Here, life moves to the gentle rhythm of the tides, and the sea provides a bountiful harvest. Yet, beneath this idyllic surface, woven into the vibrant tapestry of island folklore, are tales of a creature that embodies the ocean's hidden savagery, a predator perfectly adapted to the unique and treacherous underwater landscape. The heart of Lusker's domain lies within the mysterious blue holes. These are geological wonders, deep, circular underwater caverns or sinkholes that plunge hundreds, sometimes thousands of feet into the limestone bedrock of the islands. From the surface, they appear as mesmerizing, dark sapphire eyes staring up from the lighter turquoise of the shallows. Beautiful, yet profoundly unnerving. Their depths are often unexplored, a labyrinth of submerged tunnels and chambers where sunlight barely penetrates and strange, ancient life forms may dwell. It is from these abyssal portals, these gateways to the lightless underworld, that the Lusker is said to emerge. Imagine a small, brightly painted fishing boat. The Island Queen, captained by an old Bahamian fisherman named Josiah, his skin like weathered mahogany, his eyes holding the wisdom of 1,000 tides. With him is his grandson, young Kai, eager to learn the ways of the sea. They are fishing near Andros Island, renowned for its extensive system of blue holes, some of which are said to be bottomless, connecting to unknown subterranean realms. The day is hot, the sun a blazing disk in a cloudless sky. The water is calm, its surface shimmering like hammered silver. Josiah has chosen a spot near the edge of a particularly large and infamous blue hole, a place his own grandfather warned him about, a place whispered to be a favored hunting ground of the beast. But the fishing has been poor elsewhere, and desperation, or perhaps a touch of old man's stubbornness, has led him here. Kai, young and fearless, peers over the side of the Island Queen, fascinated by the abrupt transition from the sunlit, sandy bottom of the shallows to the inky, unfathomable blackness of the blue hole's mouth. It looks like a doorway to another world, cold and silent. He trails his hand in the warm surface water, feeling the subtle, almost imperceptible pull of a current drawing towards the hole. Josiah, mending a net, his movements slow and deliberate, suddenly looks up, his head cocked, a strange, distant expression in his eyes. The water, it feels wrong, boy, he murmurs, his voice barely a whisper, like it's holding its breath, waiting. The air moments before filled with the gentle slap of waves against the hull and the distant cries of gulls seems to fall silent. An oppressive stillness descends, broken only by the thrumming of cicadas from the nearby shore. The vibrant colors of the reef fish, usually darting in and out of the coral heads, have vanished. The sea around the blue hole takes on a darker, more oily sheen. Kai feels a shiver trace its way down his spine, despite the sweltering heat. "Grandpapa, what is it?" Before Josiah can answer, the surface of the blue hole begins to churn. Not violently at first, but with a slow, deliberate roiling, as if something immense is stirring in the depths below, displacing the water. Bubbles, large and oily, begin to break the surface, releasing a faint, musky odor, like that of a wet cave mixed with something else. Something reptilian, or perhaps like the ink of a colossal squid. Then from the dark, sapphire heart of the blue hole, something begins to rise. It is not a single, cohesive shape, but a multitude of forms, a writhing, tangled mass that defies easy description. Long, pale tentacles, thick as a man's thigh and lined with rows of powerful suckers, snake upwards, their tips quivering as if tasting the water, sensing their prey. These are not the graceful limbs of an ordinary octopus. They are longer, stronger, more muscular, and they seem to move with a chilling, predatory intelligence. But intertwined with these terrifying, grasping arms are other shapes, darker, more streamlined, cutting through the water with a horrifying speed. The sleek, grey-black fin of a massive shark slices the surface, then another and another. But these are no ordinary sharks. Their bodies seem wrong. Where a shark's tail should be, there is only the continuation of that writhing mass of tentacles. and where the head of a great cephalopod might be, there is the unmistakable gaping maw of a monstrous shark. Its jaws lined with rows upon rows of serrated, triangular teeth, each one as long as a man's finger. It is the Lusca, the impossible hybrid, the ultimate predator of the blue holes, part colossal octopus or squid, part gigantic, ravenous shark. A creature that combines the crushing, entangling power of tentacles with the tearing, rending fury of a shark's bite. The creature, or perhaps it is a collective of creatures fused into one monstrous entity, begins to move towards the island queen. Its many eyes, the cold, black, emotionless eyes of a shark, and the large, intelligent, almost human-like eyes of a cephalopod, all fix upon the small boat and its terrified occupants. Josiah, his face a mask of grim resignation, shoves a rusty harpoon into Kai's hands. "Pray to whatever gods you know, boy," he rasps, his voice hoarse, "for the sea devil has come for us." The water around the island queen erupts as the Lusca attacks. Tentacles, strong as pythons, lash out, wrapping around the oars, snapping them like twigs. One colossal arm, its suckers leaving burning welts on the painted wood, grips the stern of the boat, pulling it downwards towards the gaping, shadowy mouth of the blue hole. The boat tilts precariously, the turquoise water, moments before so inviting, now a terrifying, churning maw. Kai screams as he sees the shark-like head of one part of the Lusca rise from the water beside the boat, its jaws agape, revealing those rows of terrible teeth. He can smell its breath, a fetid stench of brine and half-digested fish. He thrusts the harpoon with all his young might, but it glances off the creature's tough, rubbery hide, doing little more than angering it. The boat is being dragged faster now into the dark, swirling vortex that marks the entrance to the blue hole. Josiah, with a roar of defiance, swings his fishing gaff, trying to fend off a coiling tentacle that is reaching for his grandson. He knows this is a futile gesture, a last act of defiance against an ancient, unstoppable horror. The light from the surface world is diminishing as they are pulled deeper, the water growing colder, the pressure increasing. Kai can see the shadowy, labyrinthine tunnels of the blue hole yawning beneath them, a gateway to a lightless, watery hell. The last thing he sees before the darkness and the icy water claim him is one of Josiah's gnarled hands reaching for him, and the glint of 100 razor-sharp teeth in the monstrous shark-like maw of the Lusca as it lunges, its many tentacles coiling around their sinking vessel, pulling them down, down into the silent, eternal blackness of its abyssal lair. Aspidochelone, the deceptive island beast. Let us cast our imaginations back to an age when the maps of the world were filled with vast, empty spaces marked only by "Here be dragons" or terra incognita. In these times, sailors, driven by the thirst for discovery, for riches, or fleeing from turmoil in their homelands, would spend months, even years, upon the boundless, often merciless ocean. Their wooden ships were fragile havens in an immensity that could swallow them without a trace. It is on such a vessel, let us call her the Wanderer's Hope, a stout caravel captained by a man named Roderick, a navigator of considerable skill but whose ambition sometimes outstripped his caution, that our tale begins. They have been at sea for many moons, their supplies dwindling, their water casks running low, and the crew, a mixture of hopeful adventurers and hardened sea dogs, are growing weary and mutinous. The relentless sun beats down, the sails hang limp in a dead calm, and the vast empty horizon offers no solace, only the shimmering, heat-hazed promise of more endless water. Despair is beginning to set in. Men whisper of turning back, though back to where none can truly say, for they are hopelessly lost. Roderick, his face etched with worry, but his demeanor outwardly resolute, pores over his charts, which show only blank ocean in their current vicinity. He prays to the saints, to any god that might listen, for a sign, for land, for salvation. And then, as if in answer to his desperate pleas, a cry from the crow's nest. Young Thomas, his voice cracked with disbelief and overwhelming relief, shouts, "Land! Land! Ahoy! Praise be to God! Captain, I see land!" A surge of energy electrifies the ship. Men who were slumped in listless despair scramble to the rails, their eyes straining, their hearts pounding with renewed hope. And there, on the hazy horizon, at first a mere smudge, then slowly resolving into a distinct shape, is an island. It is not large, perhaps a league or so in circumference, but it is green, gloriously green, a vibrant emerald jewel set in the sapphire sea. They can see trees tall and lush, their foliage swaying gently in a breeze that has not yet reached their becalmed ship. They can almost smell the scent of damp earth, of flowers, of fresh water. Captain Roderick feels tears well in his eyes. An uncharted island, a miracle. He orders the few remaining longboats to be lowered, a small, eager party to be formed. They will land, find fresh water, perhaps hunt for game, and rest their weary limbs on solid ground. The wanderers hope, with a skeleton crew, will anchor offshore. As they row closer, the island seems even more inviting. Its shores are gentle, sloping beaches of fine, dark sand. Strange, beautiful flowers in hues of crimson and gold bloom in abundance among the verdant undergrowth. Small streams, their water crystal clear, can be seen trickling down mossy rocks into the sea. The trees are unlike any they have seen before, their bark gnarled and ancient looking, their leaves broad and providing deep, inviting shade. The air is sweet, filled with the chirping of unseen birds and the gentle hum of insects. It is a paradise, an Eden sprung from the desolate ocean. The landing party, led by Roderick himself, steps ashore with joyous cries. They fall to their knees, kissing the dark, warm sand. Some rush to the streams, cupping the cool, fresh water in their hands and drinking deeply. Others begin to explore, marveling at the strange beauty of the flora. They find no sign of human habitation, no dangerous beasts, only peace and abundance. Roderick, feeling a profound sense of relief and triumph, decides they will make camp for the night. They gather driftwood, easily found along the shore, and soon a cheerful fire is crackling, its smoke curling lazily into the twilight sky. The men sing shanties, their voices, though rough, filled with a newfound joy. They cook some of the dried fish they have left, the smell mingling with the fragrant aroma of the island's blossoms. The stars emerge, brilliant and close in the clear tropical night. It is a scene of perfect contentment. Young Thomas, who first sighted the island, wanders a little way from the campfire, drawn by the sound of the gentle surf. He sits upon a large, smooth, dark rock near the water's edge, feeling the warmth of the day still radiating from its surface. He notices idly the strange, regular patterns upon the rock, almost like scales. And the ground beneath his feet, this soft, loamy earth, it seems to have a peculiar give to it, a slight, almost imperceptible resilience, as if he were walking on something that was not quite solid. He dismisses these thoughts as fancies born of weariness and the strangeness of their discovery. Back at the campfire, Captain Roderick raises a cup of watered wine in a toast. "To our salvation!" he cries. "To this blessed isle which the Almighty has seen fit to provide." The men cheer, their voices echoing in the sudden stillness of the night. As the night deepens and the men, one by one, succumb to a contented sleep around the dying embers of their fire, a subtle change begins to occur. The gentle lapping of the waves against the shore seems to grow a little stronger, a little more insistent. The ground beneath them, that soft, yielding earth, seems to shift, just a fraction, accompanied by a low, almost inaudible groan, like the sigh of some immense, slumbering beast. Young Thomas, still awake by his rock, feels it more distinctly. The rock beneath him trembles, not from an earth tremor, but with a slow, deliberate movement. He looks out to where the wanderer's hope is anchored, a dark silhouette against the starlit sea. He notices with a dawning, chilling unease that the ship seems further away than it was before, and the shoreline, the beautiful, inviting beach where they landed with such joy, appears to be receding. He scrambles to his feet, his heart suddenly a cold knot of fear in his chest. He looks around at the sleeping forms of his crewmates, at the gently swaying trees, at the beautiful, fragrant flowers, and then he looks down at the very ground he stands upon. He scrapes at it with his boot, pushing aside the soft earth and the tangled roots of the strange plants. Beneath, he sees not rock, not stone, but something dark, leathery, and patterned with immense plate-like scutes, like the shell of some colossal, unimaginable turtle, or the hide of a whale so vast it beggars belief. A horrifying realization begins to dawn in his mind, a truth so monstrous, so impossible, that his sanity reels. This is no island. This blessed isle, this paradise sprung from the sea, is not land at all. He opens his mouth to scream a warning, to rouse his sleeping captain and crewmates from their blissful ignorance. But before any sound can escape his lips, the entire island gives a profound, shuddering lurch. The trees around them sway violently, not from any wind, but because their roots are embedded in living flesh. The ground beneath their feet begins to tilt, slowly at first, then with increasing, terrifying speed. The campfire, its embers still glowing, slides towards the sea, hissing as it meets the water. The sleeping men begin to stir, crying out in confusion and alarm as they are tumbled from their slumber, as the very earth beneath them betrays their trust, as their sanctuary, their Eden, begins to sink, deliberately, inexorably, back into the cold, dark, waiting depths of the ocean, taking them all with it into an abyss from which there is no return, dragged down by the patient, deceptive island beast known as Aspidocolone. Makara, the abyssal chimera of sacred waters. Let us transport our senses to a time steeped in antiquity, where the air itself hummed with devotion, and the natural world was seen as a vibrant tapestry woven by divine hands. Imagine the banks of a mighty river, perhaps the sacred Ganga herself, her waters broad and life-giving, flowing from the icy fastnesses of the Himalayas down to the fertile plains, carrying the prayers and ashes of countless generations. Or picture the tumultuous shores where the Indian Ocean, vast and mysterious, crashes against temple-crowned cliffs, its depths holding secrets as old as time. It is in these sacred waters, both fresh and salt, that the Makara holds dominion. This is no simple beast of scale and fin, no ordinary denizen of the aquatic realm. The Makara is a chimera, a magnificent, awe-inspiring amalgamation of creatures, embodying the untamed power and fertile abundance of the waters it inhabits. Its form, though varying in depiction across the ages and regions, often possesses the powerful, intelligent head of an elephant, complete with a sinuous trunk capable of uprooting trees or delicately plucking a lotus flower, and sometimes bearing formidable tusks of ivory. Its body might be that of a mighty crocodile or a great fish covered in shimmering, armor-like scales that glint with hues of emerald, sapphire, and gold. Its jaws, often elongated and filled with rows of sharp, formidable teeth, speak of a predator's might, yet its eyes hold an ancient, serene wisdom, and its tail, sometimes that of a fish, sometimes a flamboyant peacock-like flourish, or even adorned with floral motifs, propels it through the water with grace and immense power. It is a being of contrasts, part terrestrial majesty, part aquatic terror, part divine artistry. The Makara is not merely a creature, it is a vahana, a divine vehicle for powerful deities. The mighty Varuna, god of the celestial oceans, cosmic law, and the underworld, is often depicted riding upon its broad, scaly back, his presence lending the Makara an aura of profound, divine authority. Ganga, the personified goddess of the sacred river too, claims the Makara as her steed, its form a testament to her life-giving, yet potentially destructive power. Thus the Makara is a guardian of thresholds, a protector of sacred spaces, often seen adorning the entrances to temples, its fearsome visage warding off evil spirits, its presence sanctifying the waters that flow nearby. Consider a young temple artisan named Deva, tasked with carving a new stone archway for the riverside shrine of Varuna. He has spent weeks sketching designs, his mind filled with images of gods and celestial beings, but he struggles to capture the true essence of the Makara, this creature he has only heard of in priestly chants and ancient stories. He needs to see it, to feel its power, to understand its spirit. Driven by an artistic fervor that borders on obsession, Deva takes a small reed boat one moonless night, paddling out into the center of the wide, dark river, where it meets the whispering estuary, a place where the fresh waters mingle with the salty tang of the approaching sea. The air is thick with the scent of lotus blossoms and damp earth. The only sounds are the gentle lapping of water against his boat, and the distant cries of nocturnal creatures from the dense jungle lining the banks. He carries with him a single, flickering oil lamp, its small flame casting dancing shadows that make the familiar world seem strange and filled with unseen presences. He waits, his heart a mixture of hope and trepidation. He chants the ancient hymns to Varuna, his voice a low murmur against the vast silence of the night. Hours pass. The stars wheel overhead, cold and distant. Doubt begins to creep into Deva's mind. Perhaps the Makara is merely a symbol, a figment of priestly imagination, a creature of stone and story, not of flesh and water. Just as the first faint hint of dawn begins to lighten the eastern sky, painting it in hues of soft gray and rose, the water before Deva's boat begins to stir. Not with the gentle ripple of a fish, nor the wake of a passing crocodile. This is a profound, powerful disturbance, as if something immense is rising from the river's deepest, mud-caked bed. The surface of the water bulges upwards, forming a smooth, dark mound. Then, with a sound like the sigh of 100 ancient trees, the water parts. Slowly, majestically, a form begins to emerge. First a broad noble brow, then the unmistakable sinuous curve of a mighty trunk, glistening wetly in the pre-dawn light, its tip gently testing the air. Two tusks, like polished crescents of a captive moon, gleam with an inner luminescence. Deva stares, his breath caught in his throat, his oil lamp trembling in his hand, threatening to extinguish. This is no mere animal. This is power incarnate, an ancient spirit of the water made manifest. The Makara's head rises further, revealing eyes that seem to hold the wisdom of all the ages, eyes that are not merely animalistic, but hold a deep, knowing intelligence, reflecting the dawning sky like pools of liquid amber. Its skin, where visible, is a mosaic of iridescent scales, shimmering with every color of the rainbow, yet predominantly a deep river-bottom green, like jade that has slumbered for centuries. The creature makes no aggressive move. It simply regards Deva, its immense presence filling the world, the air around it crackling with an almost palpable energy. Deva can see the powerful swell of its chest, the hint of its massive crocodilian body still largely submerged, the water swirling around it in powerful eddies. He can smell its breath, a clean, earthy scent, like freshly turned soil after a monsoon rain, mixed with the faint, briny tang of the distant sea. He feels no fear, only an overwhelming sense of awe, of reverence. This is the guardian, the vehicle of the gods, the very essence of the sacred river's might and mystery. He understands now. He sees the curves, the power, the serene majesty he must capture in stone. The Makara holds his gaze for what seems an eternity. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, its great head begins to dip. Its trunk curls, almost as if in a gesture of acknowledgement, or perhaps a silent blessing. It begins to submerge, not with a splash, but with a smooth, powerful, almost silent grace, the water closing over its colossal form as if it were merely reclaiming its own. Diva watches, transfixed, until the last ripple has faded, until the river is once more a calm, dark mirror reflecting the brightening sky. He is alone again in his small boat, but he has changed. He has seen. He paddles back to shore, his mind ablaze with inspiration, the image of the Makara seared into his soul. He will carve it, he knows, not just as a beast, but as a divine presence, a guardian of the sacred. But as he nears the bank, where the first rays of the rising sun are beginning to pierce through the jungle canopy, he notices something in the soft mud at the river's edge, something that was not there before. A single, colossal footprint, a print that is part elephantine, part reptilian, and impossibly large. And leading from it, towards the dense, unexplored jungle, are drag marks, as if something of immense weight, with a powerful, scaly tail, has recently hauled itself from the sacred river, its purpose unknown, its destination a chilling mystery. The air, which moments before had felt sanctified, now holds a new, subtle tension, a hint that the guardian of the waters may also be a sentinel of secrets far deeper and perhaps far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. Sea monk and sea bishop, clergy of the churning deep, let us cast our nets into the waters of a bygone era, the 16th century, time of burgeoning exploration and fervent faith, when the natural world was a vast cabinet of curiosities, and the ocean, in particular, was a realm of profound mystery, capable of yielding forth wonders and horrors in equal measure. Along the rugged, windswept coastlines of northern Europe, from the stormy shores of Denmark and Norway to the Baltic coasts of Poland and Germany, fishermen, hardy souls who wrestled their living from the cold grey sea, would sometimes haul in catches that defied all earthly understanding. Imagine a small, sturdy fishing vessel. Let us call it the Good Hope, its timbers creaking under the strain of a heavy net, battling the choppy waves of the Öresund, the narrow strait between Denmark and Sweden. The sky is a low, brooding grey, the wind whips salt spray into the faces of the fishermen, and the sea itself is a restless, slate-coloured beast. After hours of fruitless toil, the net suddenly grows heavy, almost unmanageably so. The men, led by their grizzled captain, a man named Magnus, strain at the ropes, their muscles burning, their breath misting in the cold air, anticipating a bountiful catch of cod or herring. As the bulging net is finally hoisted towards the deck, a collective gasp, a mixture of shock and profound unease escapes the lips of the crew. For entangled amongst the thrashing, silver bodies of ordinary fish is something else, something utterly bizarre, something that seems a grotesque parody of a holy man. It is roughly the size of a large cod, perhaps a little larger, its skin slick and dark, the color of wet slate or a monk's habit, but it is its head that draws their horrified, fascinated gaze. It is smooth, rounded, and distinctly bald on top, as if tonsured, with a fringe of darker flesh, or perhaps short, fin-like protrusions that resemble a monk's cowl pulled low. Its eyes are large, dark, and unblinking, holding an expression that the fisherman cannot quite decipher. Is it sorrow, or merely the blank indifference of a creature dragged from its abyssal home? Its body is somewhat flattened, and where pectoral fins should be, there are broader, flap-like appendages that hang down, eerily reminiscent of the sleeves of a monastic robe. It makes no sound, no struggle beyond a feeble twitching, its silence more unnerving than any monstrous roar. The men of the Good Hope stare, their initial hopes of a rich catch forgotten, replaced by a mixture of fear and superstitious awe. Is it an omen? A demon in disguise, sent to mock their faith? Or perhaps some whisper, a soul of a drowned monk, transformed by the sea's strange alchemy? Magnus, a devout man, crosses himself, muttering a prayer for protection. He orders the strange creature to be carefully disentangled and placed in a barrel of seawater. He must show this sea monk, as they begin to call it, to the learned men, to the priests in Copenhagen. Surely they will know what to make of such an unholy, or perhaps holy, marvel. News of such catches, though rare, would spread like wildfire through the coastal communities and eventually reach the ears of scholars and naturalists of the age, men like Conrad Gessner or Ulissa Aldrovandi, who meticulously catalogued the wonders of the natural world, often relying on sailors' tales and crude drawings. The sea monk became a subject of intense debate and speculation. Was it a deformed ray, a strangely shaped squid, or something entirely new, a testament to the boundless, often bizarre, creativity of the creator? But the sea monk was not the only clerical anomaly to be reportedly drawn from the deep. Even more astonishing, perhaps, was the creature known as the sea bishop. Imagine another scene, this time off the coast of Poland, a few years later. A different boat, a different crew, but a similar sense of bewildered shock. This creature, when hauled from the depths, is larger, more imposing. Its head is said to be distinctly pointed, or perhaps adorned with a tall crest-like fin, strikingly similar in shape to a bishop's mitre. Its body is covered in scales that shimmer with an almost metallic luster, and its large pectoral fins are broad and flowing, like the ornate vestments of a high-ranking church official. Some accounts even describe fringe-like appendages along its lower body, resembling the edge of a cope or chasuble. The sea bishop, when brought ashore, often caused an even greater stir. Such a creature, with its undeniable resemblance to a prelate of the church, could not be easily dismissed. One famous account tells of a sea bishop caught in 1531, which was presented to the King of Poland. The creature, it was said, was kept alive for a time in a large tank. It refused all food, its large, sorrowful eyes seemingly fixed on some distant, unseen horizon. Clergymen attempted to communicate with it, speaking in Latin, in Polish, in German, hoping for some sign, some indication of its nature or purpose. Was it a messenger from a lost underwater diocese? A soul in purgatory, seeking prayers, or a cunning mockery sent by infernal powers? The sea bishop remained silent, its gaze unwavering, its strange mitre-shaped head held with a peculiar, almost regal dignity. It would make soft, sighing sounds and sometimes trace strange patterns with its fin-like sleeves against the side of its tank. Days turned into weeks. The learned men debated, the common folk whispered, and the creature slowly weakened, its vibrant colors fading, its movements growing more sluggish. It seemed to be yearning for something, its entire being focused on an escape that was impossible. One morning, the guards attending the sea bishop's tank found it empty. There was no sign of struggle, no broken seals, no indication of how such a large and presumably aquatic creature could have vanished from a secure inland location. The water in the tank was still, undisturbed, yet the sea bishop was gone. Had it dematerialized? Had it been reclaimed by some unseen aquatic power? Or had its captors, unnerved by its silent, sorrowful presence and its increasingly frail condition, perhaps secretly returned it to the sea, unwilling to witness its demise or face the unsettling questions its death might raise? The chronicles are silent on this point, offering no easy answers. The fishermen who had first encountered these beings were left with an enduring sense of unease. The sea, which they thought they knew, had revealed a new, bewildering facet of its mystery. It could not only birth horrors of tooth and claw, but also these silent, enigmatic mockeries, or perhaps reflections of their own sacred world. They would look out at the grey, churning waves with a new apprehension, wondering what other strange, tonsured heads or mitred forms might be gliding silently through the sunless depths, their thoughts unknown, their purpose a chilling enigma. And as the storms gathered and the waves crashed against their fragile boats, they would sometimes fancy they heard, beneath the howl of the wind and the roar of the sea, a faint, almost inaudible chanting, a deep, resonant liturgy from a cathedral of coral and bone, a sound that hinted that the true clergy of the abyss were merely biding their time, their silent, watchful eyes fixed upon the world of men, waiting for a sign. From ancient leviathans to cursed ghost ships, the legends of the deep continue to fascinate and frighten. Are they mere tales, or do shadows still lurk beneath the waves? What do you believe? If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown with our world, our stories, please like this video and subscribe for more adventures into the myths that shape our world. Comment below with your favorite sea legend. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember the stories our world has to tell.